Today we are going to cover how to take the lighting effects from some structures that you may find online and recreate a layered Photoshop file in which you can place your design and still have the effects, such as you see I have this highlight layer here and I have this shadows layer here, and then I just have this kind of flat color in here representing where the design will go. And I will quickly show you how to do that. I'm trying a few new things today with this. First and foremost, I am making my view of my desktop cartoonishly large so that you can view it on your phone, or even if you have to shrink the window so you can work kind of split screen on your laptops. Hopefully you can still see everything. This is as big as I can make it, so hopefully that's helpful. And then also I'm going to be breaking this down into a few parts, so there'll be a couple different parts to today's lesson. Okay, so basically, like I said, we're just going to kind of create a layered file from some structure you might find online, and I'm trying to do it at a pretty low resolution. This file is about 6 by 8, like 150, so sometimes you might be limited with what you can find online. So this is a way to kind of take some of the details from that. So the first thing I like to do when I'm creating any kind of structure for a template or anything like that, obviously you find the image, and I grabbed this pouch just to be one of the things that we work with today, and we'll try it on at least one more structure. But the first thing I like to do when I have the structure is create like a mask or some kind of outline of the actual shape, so that we can put our design within that shape, and we'll be able to mask it into that shape of the structure. So I always like to use the quick selection tool, and W is the key for the selection tools, quick selection tool and wand tool. So if I press W, I'll get this quick selection tool. And again, if it's on one of the other selection tools like wand, you can hold shift and press W, and it will cycle through the various selection tools. But you're looking for the one that looks like this. It's like a paintbrush with a little oval, dotted oval next to it. And then, again, we've reviewed this a couple times. You can make the selection area bigger and smaller. I just make it around this size for now and see how that works. Sometimes when you're working on an image that is, doesn't have a lot of contrast, like this actually, the darkest part of this is like, this shadow down here, but really this whole image is pretty light. So you might have some difficulty grabbing the whole thing without it selecting everything. So if that happens, again, right now I'm just kind of clicking and dragging, and you see I have the little add icon. That's just the default mode for this tool. But inevitably I hit a point where it actually grabbed everything in the background. So if I hold Option, you can see that inside that circle it goes from a plus to being a minus, and I'll just like drag around the outside of it, and you can see that's kind of deselecting all that stuff it just picked up. And again, I just held down Option and kept on clicking and dragging until most of that outside was deselected again, and then I can go ahead and keep adding new points, and that's pretty good. Now, because this is kind of low res, what you might want to do is just clean it up with Quick Mask. So Q is the key for Quick Mask, or it's also down here at the bottom of your tools palette on the left. When I hit Q, you're going to see that it does a pretty good job of selecting most of this, but it gives you this kind of like rough, like pixelated looking edge. Again, that's because this is kind of low res. So what I like to do is go in with the brush tool, and B is the quick key for brush tool. And again, you can make this bigger or smaller. I actually like that it's small right now. But what I do want to do is I want to go to my brush settings, and it looks like this little icon if you have these kind of icon menu items up here, or anything you're looking for. You can always go to Window, and then brush settings is under Window if it's not one of your default tools that you're using a lot. And for this, the spacing is down to 1% because basically I want to get like straight lines. And anytime I'm using a hard edge brush, as you can see, I have a 100% hard edge brush here. The spacing going down to 1% will basically just take away, kind of this like scallopy like looking edge. And you can see, the more I have the spacing, the default spacing is usually about 25. And at this size of a brush, you don't really see much of a difference, but just to kind of drag it out, if you had a bigger brush even, if I make the size of this brush bigger, even when I'm at the default like 25, you could see there's these kind of like bumpy textures in there. So take it down to 0 and you can see it kind of just cleans it up. Now I only use this kind of 1% spacing when I'm using a hard edge brush, and only when I'm trying to do straight lines and just clean stuff up. So I have this hard edge brush, and right now with black selected, that is kind of adding to the red, and the red is like kind of like what the selection is at, or like the negative of the selection, I should say. So if I paint black in here, it's going to paint red, right? So like you can see, and then if I like click in one spot and hold shift and click to another spot, it goes in a straight line, and I can do that a couple times together, just holding shift while I click. Just going to Command Z out of that. And that's basically what I'm going to do to clean up this edge. I mean, I could zoom in a little bit if I really want to get perfect here. And I'm just going to kind of, I want to tab this out or whatever, just to get that little tab in that was like on this side, clean this up a little. And then, again, I can kind of just click and drag with the red along this line and, we'll clean that up a little bit. Another way I could do this, I can kind of just do it on the outside and then like change the color to white and then do it on the inside of this. And that kind of helps up clean up those inside bits. So, again, it's kind of, it's not a bad idea to like do all this if, you're really trying to have a clean render. But, I like to do this stuff kind of quickly when I'm not sure what my structure is. So right now, again, I'm just going to kind of just click and drag quickly, and then I won't spend like a ton of time doing it, and just clean that up a little bit. But again, this doesn't really have to be perfect, because I don't know if I'm going to use this structure yet. So I will, again, if you know this is a structure you're going to use and you want to spend a little more time cleaning it up, that's fine. But for now, all I really want to do is get the selection. So I'm going to exit quick mask again by hitting Q, or again, you can click here, and just always know when there's quick mask, it says it up here in this top bar of your file, just in case you get stuck in it and you don't realize what's happening, or you have your quick mask, remember you can double click quick mask and change the opacity or the color of your actual quick mask. So again, that's Q to launch it and Q to exit from it. So now I have my selection of the pouch, and I'm just going to create a new folder, and ultimately this serves two purposes. One, I'm going to put, I'm going to do a new folder, not a layer. And again, if you want to add something, like a folder or layer, you can do it at the bottom of your layers palette really easily. And I'm going to put the mask on this folder, and this is basically, I'm going to drop designs into this folder eventually, so I'll just rename this design goes here for now. But ultimately, the great thing is now I have this mask, and I can hold Command and click on it and always select that. So if I want to affect anything or mask anything with that, again, I can always relaunch that selection. So I am going to, next thing I'm going to do, I don't really have to hide this or anything, but this is a step I do with these kind of, templates that I'm creating, is I'm going to create a curves layer, like a contrast layer, to end up stealing the highlights. Now the shadows is pretty easy. If you're dealing with like a white structure you find, and a lot of structures you'll find online are white, or at least like look like this, where they're kind of like light colored, maybe it's a really light gray, you can kind of just use the shadows as is by multiplying this. So first I'm just going to unlock this background by double clicking on it. When I double click this, new layer will pop up. You can name it if you want, but I'm just going to hit OK for now. And then I'm going to create a new layer below it. Now, while this is unlocked, if I hold Command and click on a new layer, it will put the new layer below it. If I just clicked new layer, it will add it above it. And but again, you can add the new layer above it and drag it below it. But I am going to just fill this new layer with black for the time being. Or you know what, I'll do a gray. So I'm just going to do like a, I don't know, somewhere in like a mid-range, like 50% gray, something like that. And then I am going to convert this whole thing to grayscale. So right now, this is an RGB image I got off the internet. You can see it is RGB. But if I go into image mode grayscale, it'll just help make this whole transition easier, so things will truly be in black and white in grayscale. And I'm not going to merge it, so hit OK. And then it's just going to discard the color information. Now you can see up here it says gray. So now what that does is it just simplifies. So instead of having like RGB or CMYK, I just have one channel, and it's the grayscale channel. Now I'm going to go back to my layers, and I am going to use curves to pump up the contrast of this so I can steal these highlights. Okay, so now I'm going to play around with it, and even just pulling this all the way like that, you can see it kind of gives me like what the highlight areas are. Now it's a little dirty, but that's okay, again, because this is low res. I'll show you some ways to clean that up later. But for now, that's kind of a good contrast. I think I'm going to keep it. And you can see all I did was take a curves layer, and I just dragged the middle point from the mid-tones here and pulled it all the way up to like the top left over here. And, again, this is not perfect now, but I'll show you how this is going to be useful later. So I'm going to hide this properties for now just so you can see everything. But I have my curves layer. I can turn it on and off. And again, all I'm doing is really increasing the contrast of this like gray in here so that it kind of gives me some shapes to pull for highlights. And even you can see like the nice little details of this kind of textured edge here. So now I have that, and I'm going to go back to my channels, and similar to how we grabbed anything earlier in this semester where we use like smoke or wood or whatever, we're grabbing textures by making a selection of our channel. I'm going to do the same thing. So if I hold down Command, again, it gives me that little marquee symbol next to the hand, and I click on this thumbnail of that channel, you can see it's selecting all the white in the image. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to create this on the top though. So I'm going to click the topmost layer. When I click on a folder, it actually just adds it to the folder sometimes, depending on the version you're working in. But I just raising it to the top by hitting Command and bracket right. Again, Command bracket right moves layers up. Command bracket left moves them down. If I just keep on toggling back and forth, you can see it's easy to move layers that way. And I'm going to fill this with white now. Okay, so to fill a layer with the background color, it's Command delete. If I wanted to fill it with gray, it would be Option delete. Okay, so Command delete will fill with the white. And then I'm going to deselect this. So now I've like just filled that selection of the channel with white. But just to kind of like show you what's going on, I'm going to turn off everything except for this white layer and the background layer. So you can kind of see how the white is interacting with just a black or just a gray background. Okay, so again, it's very similar to what that black and white kind of look like, but again, it's all just the white has been pulled from there, and it just is sitting on a gray background. Now I can mask this by holding Command and clicking on the mask, and then I add the mask to there, and just like that, I have a pretty good highlight layer. So that's pretty simple right there. And then now I have this original layer here. If I would take that and just make a copy of that, and again, I'm just making a copy of it because I want to just preserve the original layer in case I actually do something to that, copy. So I'm going to hit Command J to duplicate it. I'm going to hide the original, and I'm going to move this up below the those white details, and I'm going to name those white details highlights, and I'm going to name this layer shadows. And I'm going to change the blending mode of shadows to linear burn, which again, you all know I like as a multiply kind of effect. And it's kind of heavy, and both of these are kind of heavy right now, but you can adjust them. So I'm going to go to this highlights layer and pull back the opacity. And I'm going to go to this shadows layer and pull down the opacity a little bit too. And now you can start to see what I have here is a shadow layer that can turn on and off, and a highlights layer that can turn on and off. And I have the gray background, and remember, I'm going to turn this design goes here folder. And just for now, I'm going to change the color back. I'm actually going to change it to CMYK this time. So if I go to image mode, CMYK, and again, I'm not going to merge, and all my layers stay intact because curves is just a simple contrast. Actually, what it did do is though it changed a little bit the way these layers are kind of affecting the background. So I can go back and adjust that. But basically, what I want to show you again is I have the highlights layer, I have the shadows layer, and then I have this folder here that I could put anything in. So I'm just going to pick a different contrasting color from the background, maybe just like a blue color. And I'm going to create a new layer in this folder, and I'm going to just drag a little box, kind of covering the whole shape of that pouch, and I'm going to fill it with the blue. Again, because it's my foreground color, Option Delete will fill it. And I'm just going to Command D to deselect it, and now you can see, because that's masked inside this folder, I now have, again, a highlight layer, a shadow layer, and again, I can go and adjust this if I want the shadows to be really dark or really subtle. And actually, the shadow layer is picking up all the the natural base shadow and reflection that kind of came along with that. And the highlights layer again, right now I just have it on normal white, but you can mess around with it depending on what the background color of your structure is or what the graphics are. Maybe you can make it an overlay layer. It's just different. I'm toggling back and forth so you can see overlay kind of keeps it like highlights, but it's a lot more subtle and a little softer. And again, you can always bring the opacity down further, play around with these blending modes, but that is the gist of it. So for this part, that's basically how you can find something, any structure, any plane structure you find, any rendering, and create basically just something you could work with and maintain the realistic shadows and effects of that. And again, I'm just turning them off so you can see below that is blue. And we will move on to some more things you could do with that in the next part. Okay? Thank you.